All right, hello and welcome back to online English class. I hope you guys are doing well today. Today we're going to be finishing up OTN 1, which is our analysis of Act 1 of King Lear. So make sure you're following along in your notes. Remember that you don't need to write these in formal prose or in essay form. That is primarily because all of your formal writing I want focused on your progress checks, which you need to be doing on a weekly basis to help prepare you for your free response question that is going to be held on your exam on May 13th for you AP Lit folks. And you also need to be writing your quarter 4 essay, which is also a kind of prose close analysis prompt analyzing the complexities of the characterization of Lear, developing a kind of close reading of how Shakespeare uses literary devices to evoke and illustrate and develop that complexity in that scene. Okay. Obviously, you need to complete OTN 1 by Friday and send email confirmation. All right. So today is Thursday, April 16th. You need to finish up OTN by Friday and then send me your email confirmation for OTN 1. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump into the OTN. Yesterday, we analyzed the setting of the play. We began looking at the internality of the characters Lear, Goneril, Regan, Cordelia, and Kent. All right, to help us kind of summarize the basic ideas illustrated to us in Shakespeare's text in the first scene. All right, let me use these kind of graphics. All right, so this is just a simple kind of worldview analysis of the ways that these characters view the world. We're not going to really get into any complicated philosophical words or systems, but we're just going to simply, and I think this is what Shakespeare would want us to do, is just simply evaluate the motives of each one of these characters and look basically under the hood of how they view their worlds. Okay, so Lear is obviously begins the narrative as a king. He has lived as a king throughout the course of his life, and that is reflected in the way that he views the world. Although he doesn't recognize that. All right, his ideal, the unifying ideal, the good, the happiness that he pursues. All right, so a very simple philosophical concept: the good. Okay, now that is obviously something that human beings construct and define, all right, in various ways, and then we call them oftentimes ideals, all right, and then we pursue those ideals. Whether we are willing to accurately describe the ideals that we actually pursue, whether we are willing to describe and define the good as our actions betray, is a measure of the extent to which we are sort of internally honest and know ourselves. Okay, so part of what it means to be a Christian is to recognize that while your ideal is imitation of Christ and obedience to God's law, that you because of the lingering effects of the flesh or your sinful nature, define the good in ways that defy God's law, defy Christ imitation, and therefore need to confess those because they are bad. All right? So, what is evident in Lear's worldview is that his ideal, or the thing that he pursues and values most highly, is his authority, which is ironic because he is abdicating his throne. He is actively giving away that authority, but the way that he does so illustrates, all right, his deeper internal desire to continue to exercise that authority, to continue to grasp that control, and to continue to have that sovereignty that is the basis of Lear's character, the basis of Lear's identity, his sense of himself. Okay, so Lear views the ideal or reality or that which is objectively good or the good as something that he is in control of. He is in control of that which is good and righteous. All right, so statements that are impossible, like Goneril and Regan's statements of affection for their father in scene 1, even if they are impossible, if they please him, are true. They are good. All right, they are right. Okay, this is very similar to the way in which the party exercises control over the metaphysical ideals of the citizens of Oceania in 1984. Right, so statements that reflect reality, if they do not please him, are false, i.e., Cordelia's, or bad, right, would probably be another word for it. Cordelia's accurate description of her affection, of her bond for her father, does not please him, and therefore is insufficient, and does not and she is cursed for it, right? She is disinherited. Okay, so in this sense, Lear is the master of his own existence. He is a kind of existential king, right? He is the king of his own existence, much in the same way that he governs over the actual physical realm that he inhabits, which is obvious in his totalitarian control as he banishes those that he wants to, and there's no checks and balances to his power, right? In the same way that he exerts a kind of totalitarian, authoritarian control of his physical environment, so too he exerts a kind of totalitarian or authoritarian control of the ideological or ideal environment surrounding him, okay? So, how does this relate to the other characters? Well, Goneril and Reagan's worldviews are reflections of their father's worldview, which is very interesting. Their ideals also seem to be unified by a desire for authority, control, and or sovereignty. Okay, so loosely speaking, Shakespeare, who was a Christian artist, right, would associate this desire for authority, control, for sovereignty as a distinctly worldly value system. All right, so when we talk about when Paul talks about the things of the world, or the dominion that the devil has over this world, what he is referring to, all right, in Shakespeare's view, and I would also agree with this, is a worldview that is based on the pursuit of authority, control, sovereignty, whether that be for ways that we would sort of loosely define as moral or good things, or ways that we would obviously define as bad. You know, you're like a meth head or something. Ultimately, the worldly value system is based on an individual attempting to establish authority, control, and sovereignty over their own life, over their own existence. Goneril and Reagan do this very similarly to their father. All right, that is why, ironically, they are so submissive to him in Act 1, Scene 1, because they recognize the power dynamic inherent to the situation, all right, and therefore their actions, even though they are dishonest, even though they are not true, are the most expedient means by which to achieve the telos of their life, which is authority, control, and sovereignty. Okay, this is clearly contrasted to Cordelia and also Kent, another significant character's worldviews, whose ideals are authentic love and honesty. Now, it's interesting because the reason why Shakespeare gives us these two juxtaposing worldviews, and the reason why this worldly value system is juxtaposed with Cordelia's non or immaterial value system, is because, right, what Shakespeare is emphasizing, okay, is a kind of godly value system motivated by love. All right, so the greatest commandment in the Christian or God's value system is to love both him and others, versus, all right, the sort of world's value system, which is based on love of self, and or perhaps that's not even the right word for it, because it is not actually authentically loving, depending on how you identify love, but perhaps autonomy, okay, freedom from the duty to love others, okay, freedom to serve oneself how one sees fit. Now, this value system subverts the power hierarchy in Lear's court, which is why it's so offensive to him. Cordelia articulates the fact that she, very similar to Kent, notice they get similar treatment. Okay, that's because Shakespeare wants us to emphasize, or wants us to notice the fact that these two characters have a similar value system, and it offends Lear in a similar way. right? They subvert his power because although their value system is based on submission to duty, all right, that is a personal conviction that transcends, okay, or frees them from fear of Lear, right? Does that make sense? That their personal conviction is something that they operate according to over and above Lear, right? In that sense, they are both duty bound and simultaneously free, all right? Again, that's also kind of a Christian concept there that Shakespeare's developing there, all right? Now, Lear, our protagonist, his flaw is pretty clearly expressed here in Act 1, Scene 1. It is his overestimation of his own control over his life, over his children, over his kingdom, and over truth and that which is good, over reality itself, over control of his existence, his overestimation of his control over his existence, his existential control, is something that causes him to tragically misjudge everyone around him. Okay? In the same way that he has misjudged the nature of who is in control of his life and who is in control of that which is good, who truly or what truly has sovereignty, so too he has misinterpreted and, or in other words, he has exercised his value system, and it has led to flawed conclusions in which he views Goneril and Regan as faithful, dutiful daughters, and Cordelia and Kent as aberrant, disrespectful, unloving, and ungrateful individuals. Okay, this is obviously completely wrong. The whole narrative is going to dramatize the process of Lear being confronted with reality. All right, so that's kind of a summary of what we saw yesterday. Let's go ahead and jump into our analysis of Gloucester, Edmund, Edgar. All right, and then we're also going to look at how Lear and Goneril and Kent continue to develop throughout the course of the end of Act 1. We're going to skip the Fool, all right, although he is awesome and interesting in and of himself. Getting into his characterization would perhaps introduce an unneeded complexity because his speeches are so difficult to read. So let's go ahead and continue on. Right, first we want to look at Gloucester and Edmund and Edgar. All right, so Edmund, like Goneril and Regan, is another example of a poorly fathered son of a blind father. Okay, so Gloucester is of the same generation as Lear. Okay, so an older, aging generation of men who are men of power, men of privilege, and they are blind to their own authoritarianism, blind to their own injustices. Okay, and so Lear's injustice is dramatized by his irrational form of partitioning the kingdom and his irrational banishment of both Cordelia and Kent. And Gloucester, in the same way, has a kind of history of injustice, a kind of history of mistreating Edmund that he completely overlooks. This is dramatized for us very clearly in Act 1, Scene 1, which is, strangely, the first conversation in the play. And it's between Kent and Gloucester are talking about Edmund. All right, so Kent's like, hey, who's that dude? Right? And Gloucester's like, oh, that's my bastard son, Edmund. And Kent's like, oh, a bastard, right? And he's like, yeah, I have been ashamed of him so many times that now I've just gotten used to it and I'm brazened to it or brazed to it, okay? In other words, Gloucester confesses the fact that throughout the course of Edmund's life, he has been ashamed of Edmund's existence. Okay, obviously he's a bastard child. He was conceived out of wedlock. But that's not Edmund's fault, right? That shouldn't affect the quality of Edmund's life. But Gloucester, following an unjust convention of his society, right, that disinherited bastard children, that punished the son for the sins of the father, right, which is unjust, socially speaking, right? Gloucester sort of allows that to shape and define his relationship with his son, Edmund. He says that there was great sport at his making. In other words, Gloucester took great pleasure in the affair that led to the creation of his son Edmund. It seemed to have been a good time. In other words, everybody benefited from Edmund's conception except for Edmund, who was kind of cursed by his birth. He calls Edmund's mom in front of Edmund a whore. And then sort of reluctantly acknowledges him. Okay. Kent's like, well, he looks like a good guy anyways, and Gloucester's like, yeah, okay, well, sure. By the way, he's leaving for another 9 years. He's already been gone, so we'll get him out of the way here pretty soon. So Gloucester, an otherwise pretty nice guy, seems to have made peace with the fact, all right, seems to overlook the fact that this mistreatment of Edmund, like calling his mother a whore in front of his face, all right, and mocking his existence, all right, is something that is going to end in Edmund being embittered to his father, right? Kent doesn't recognize the fact that this is unjust, all right? Very much like Lear doesn't recognize the injustice of his own treatment of his own children, all right? But certainly, as we learn in Act 1, Scene 2, Edmund is definitely keeping score, and he is certainly not just some little docile bastard child awaiting whatever scrap from the table of his father that he can get. In fact, he is planning on taking his brother's inheritance completely, okay? So Edmund, in a soliloquy at the beginning of Act 1, Scene 2, says, "Thou, nature, art my goddess. To thy law, to the law of nature, my services are bound." Okay, so this is just a very famous articulation of Edmund, the rebellious bastard, okay, who is a classic Shakespearean villain, okay? Edmund is a dirtbag, a very mean guy, but, all right, a lot like Shylock, a lot like Iago, there's a kind of history, a kind of context of unjust treatment that helps establish a kind of relatable motive for Edmund's anger, for Edmund's hatred. He, like Goneril and Regan, right, is going to mistreat a father who genuinely has sinned against him, all right, who is genuinely guilty of grave injustice, all right. So Edmund again sort of states to the audience openly, nature is my goddess. In other words, my value system, the God that I worship, the altar that I bow down before is the law of nature. Which obviously to Edmund is the law of, as Darwin would say, and Edmund would not say because he didn't know Charles Darwin, but the survival of the fittest, the flourishing of the powerful, and the sacrifice of the weak. In other words, his value system is very similar to Regan and Goneril's. All right, the ideal that he is aiming at is authority, sovereignty, power. That is his definition of the good. And the law that he is going to follow, which is no law at all in the end, all right, the law to which his services are bound, which is no bond at all in the end, are the law of the satisfaction and gratification of his own desires. Okay, so wherefore should I stand in the plague of custom? Okay, so why should I be the victim of custom and permit the curiosity of nations to deprive me? For that I am some 12 or 14 moonshines lag of a brother, all right? In other words, I am the eldest, but I was bastard born. So why do I have to be base? Why am I, quote unquote, a bastard? Because other people say so? Well, they're certainly not in control of my existence. They certainly aren't in charge of defining who I am. So here, Edmund is characterized very simply as a kind of existentialist, right? He is making meaning of his own existence. He is taking his life by the throat and making it what he wants it to be. All right, this obviously is a kind of complex rebellion because, on the one hand, yes, he is rebelling against unjust customs that punish sons for the sins of the father, for the dalliances of the father, but also, right, he's going to do so in a deeply immoral way. He's going to do so in a deeply selfish and self-serving way. But obviously, that is not wrong insofar as nature is God. All right, insofar as this is the ideal. All right, so this is going to affect the way that Edmund behaves throughout the course of the entire play. All right, so he approaches his father, Gloucester, and he reads him a letter that he has written. All right, indicating the fact that he, like Goneril and Regan, views that those who are in power have control over truth. All right, you get to define that which is true whenever you have power. So here in Edmund's quest for power, he begins the process of sort of taking control of that area of his existence and of existence in general, right? So what does he do? He writes in his brother's hand a threat to Gloucester's life. He says, Gloucester is, aging so stinking long, and it's getting old waiting for him to die. I'd rather take his power now while I'm young enough to enjoy it. All right. Edmund basically says to his father, I really hope this can't possibly be Edgar, our dear brother. All right. Gloucester says, has he ever spoken like this to you before? Edmund says, never, my lord. Okay, so this is him just sort of iagoing, right, using sort of duplicity, playing on the emotions of Gloucester, casting himself as this sort of reliable, virtuous, disinterested, altruistic brother. But then, right, Gloucester's trust for Edmund leads him to this irrational conclusion, this very quick conclusion that Edgar is a villain. Oh, villain, villain. His very opinion in the letter of horrid villain, unnatural, detested, brutish villain, worse than brutish. Go, sirrah, seek him. I'll apprehend him. Abominable villain, where is he? All right, so here again, right, the best way I have to sort of describe this is Gloucester's reaction is exceptionally passionate and way, way too quick. Gloucester has an entire history of a positive relationship with Edgar, who is a great guy, by the way, characterized as an excellent person throughout the course of the play. And Gloucester, when presented with even the smallest amount of evidence of Edgar's disloyalty, immediately goes to cursing him, detesting him, proclaiming him a brutish villain. Obviously, this parallels Gloucester's foil, Lear. Okay, and Shakespeare here is showing us these otherwise functional human beings, Gloucester and Lear. Okay, these are functional adult human beings who obviously have navigated life up to this point in a rational way, make very similar irrational kinds of judgments in these situations. Why? Because these threats to their authority, their control, are connected to, and this is something that Edmund and Goneril and Regan understand about their aging fathers, that is connected to their deepest fear. And when our deepest fears are attacked, right, when the things that we are most insecure about are attacked, otherwise rational kinds of people are provoked to irrational forms of anger. Okay, this area of Gloucester's life has stood a loaded gun, if you will, in corners till a day the owner came, identified, and carried it away. All right, so Gloucester and Lear's fear of aging, of losing their relevance and the respect that comes along with that, the positions of power that they are accustomed to, their fear of losing that is betrayed by their irrational anger when those positions are threatened. All right? So again, that helps crystallize that commonality between Lear and Lear's double, Gloucester in the double plot in which Gloucester, very much like Lear, is dealing with his children and what is going, how they are going to take and divide his power once he is gone. All right. Gloucester then continues in Act 1, Scene 2 on page 35 of my text to basically articulate the brokenness, the disorder of the world. All right. The late eclipses in the sun and moon portend no good to us. All right. Nature finds itself scourged by all the effects. Love cools, friendship falls off, brothers divide. In other words, Gloucester is recognizing that the social chaos or the society, the community that is a part of, is sort of being plunged in to chaos. All right, that's interesting because if you asked Edmund, he would say that the social situation that he grew up in from the very beginning, from the very moment he was born, was unjust. It was chaotic. It was not orderly. It was not fair. Okay, Gloucester, when his privilege and power is challenged, begins to experience the fact that maybe the world is not exactly as it should be. This illustrates a commonality with Lear, first of all. Second of all, his own sort of limited perspective of the world and what justice actually means. And three, finally, all right, the fact that Gloucester, right, the fact that Gloucester is going to be, in the end, all right, responsible for a major portion of this disorder, but he doesn't recognize that yet. Very similar to Lear bemoaning this disorder and chaos, but not recognizing or reckoning with the fact that it was his leadership that led them there. Okay, his poor leadership. All right, Edmund once again reaffirms his own his individual existential control of his life, basically articulating the fact that he does not believe that stars or the heavens compel anyone to be anything, but rather that he is completely in control of his own well-being and his own value system. Right? Edgar, on the other hand, is very simply, like Cordelia, honest. He is trusting by nature, and Edmund believes this honesty in his brother Edgar to be foolishness, something that Edmund will use against Edgar. Right? This betrays the fact that Edmund views virtue not as something that is good in and of itself, but rather something that can be used to achieve a goal. But if if you are suffering at the hands of your own virtue, then you're a fool. You're an idiot. Stop being virtuous. Alter your behavior. Again, this illustrates Edmund's relativism and Edgar's idealistic commitment to dutiful obedience to the call to be honest. All right. Okay, in Act 1, Scene 3, Goneril's duplicity is just clearly highlighted as soon as Lear no longer has anything to give her, as soon as the power dynamic between father and daughter has been inverted, all right, and Goneril is now in authority over Lear, and he is hosting her instead of she is hosting him instead of he hosting her, right? Goneril's attitude towards her father, obviously and very predictably, deteriorates, right? She is annoyed by him because he is an imposition on her, right? Kent, in stark juxtaposition to Goneril's duplicity and sort of the fluidity with which she approaches her relationships, especially to her father, banished Kent, wronged Kent, not righted Goneril, right? Not blessed Goneril, but cursed Kent, comes back to serve Lear in disguise. Notably, Lear cannot accept the help, the service of Kent, who is going to be a faithful, loyal servant, a loving servant, without him being in, ready, disguise. Very similar to the fool, right? The fool offers wise counsel to the Lear, but it must be disguised as folly, all right? Lear cannot accept love, truth on their surface. Okay, they defy his understanding of that which is good. And once again, progressively throughout the course of the play, he's going to be confronted with reality and forced to reckon with the fact of a kind of undisguised world that is going to disempower him, going to humble him. All right. So Kent comes back, and why does he come back? He comes back because he loves Lear. Notice that he doesn't give any other political description. He doesn't say, I've got to save the kingdom from the injustices of Goneril and Regan, although that is probably implied. But Shakespeare intentionally, I think, gives a very short reason for Kent's return. Okay, Shakespeare is certainly not opposed to writing long speeches that describe internal motives. Kent's soliloquy is short and sweet. I'm back because I love Lear, because he's my king, he's my master, and I serve my master unequivocally. Okay, wow, I love Kent for that. Okay, throughout the course of Act 1, Scene 4, Lear is confronted by Goneril's duplicity. Okay, she basically says, this is my last point for the day before we close things down. All right, so stick with me here. Goneril basically says that the knights that you have with you, this sort of last little power grab, is annoying. Why don't you, like a good old man, just let it go. Let them go. You're trying to act younger than you are, all right, and you're being really annoying. Okay? Lear here is confronted with the fact that Goneril lied to him in the court. That Goneril certainly is not sort of unequivocally devoted to pleasing her father and loving her father. Okay? Rather, when the power dynamic changes, whenever she gets what she wants, okay, she begins stripping Lear of all forms, all vestiges of his power, all vestiges of his youth, all vestiges of the things that remind him of the man that he used to be. Lear, when he sees this, says, "Darkness and devils, saddle my horses, call my train together," and he leaves, calling her a degenerate bastard. All right, I'll not trouble ye. I have yet left a daughter. Okay, in other words, I still have one daughter left. Regan, she'll treat me better. Okay, obviously, she's not going to in Act 2. And then Lear significantly goes on to curse Goneril, all right, praying for nature, his quote, dear goddess, to hear him and to dry up Goneril's wound. Okay, this is some really gross cacophonous imagery relied on here in this malediction, all right, this deep curse, and it reflects the ways in which Lear, when confronted with the ways that his power, his influence is being taken from him, all right, instead of reevaluating his station in life, instead of humbling himself, right, instead of perhaps going and repenting to Cordelia, right, because he blessed the wrong children and cursed the wrong child. Instead of this leading to any kind of turning, instead of this leading to any kind of reevaluation of the way he's viewed the world, the way that he's exercised his power, all right? Instead of it leading to any kind of reevaluation, his malediction of Goneril just shows that he is grasping that power more tightly than ever as it is slipping out of his hands, even as in the first act he sort of formally gave it away. That authority, that is the core of his value system when it is taken away from him, when the respect that comes with authority begins to ebb, right? He curses his daughter's wound. He curses his daughter's progeny. He curses his daughter and moves on to Reagans, expecting a better welcome. Well, obviously, that's not how things work in plays. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Have a great day.